Look at my house. Stuff.
I was joking with Rich. Good evening and welcome to your special City Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 11, 2021, and I would like to call this special meeting to order sharp at 6 p.m. Madam City Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Jennings.
Here.
Councilmember Rains.
Here.
Councilmember Sharma.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Minigar. Mayor Pro Tem Genoway.
Present.
And Mayor Minigar.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. At this juncture, I would like to ask my colleagues to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Thank you very much. We will now move on to public comments. Madam City Clerk, do we have any comments?
No, Mayor, there are no public comments.
Very good. The public comment section is closed. Now we get to our study session item, that is the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 operating and CIP budget, which is the Capital Improvement Program budget. City Manager Letourneau, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. It's a pleasure to present you with the fiscal year 2021-2022 operating and capital improvement budget tonight. The motto of this proposed budget is a rock-solid foundation, and it reflects the high quality and diverse level of services that are provided to the Laguna Niguel community. It is these core beliefs that Laguna Niguel was founded on, and that the proud tradition continues today, and it is what our budget is based on. While the city has certainly felt the impacts of the pandemic, we have been able to weather the economic storm due in part to a conservative spending practices and decades of fiscal responsibility. The results of this commitment include high-quality public safety, well-built and maintained infrastructure, solid economic development opportunities, and beautiful public park and trail systems. The guiding principles of this budget are rooted in the city's adopted strategic plan. Even with the economic impacts of the pandemic, the fiscal year 2021-2022 operating and capital improvement budget is balanced at $51.1 million. This budget does not utilize any reserve funds for any operating or capital needs. In fact, this budget includes a set-aside from the operating budget of $750,000 to go back into reserves and an additional $350,000 to go into the 115 pension trust to continue to build the funds to pay off the city's unfunded pension liability. An important philosophy that went into the development of the budget was the one-time American Rescue Funds from the federal government. The American Rescue Funds are only being used to fund one-time capital projects and are not included in the operating budget for any ongoing expenditures. The proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 capital improvement program budget totals $5.1 million. This year's CIP places a priority on finishing delayed projects, maintaining existing infrastructure, addressing city street needs, deferred maintenance, and completing critical infrastructure projects. In Laguna Niguel, we have a great deal to be proud of. We have one of the most beautiful and safe communities in the entire region, one that will continue to be protected and maintained so that the high quality of life can continue to be realized by all members of the community. We have an exciting year ahead of us and a rock-solid fiscal foundation to achieve our goals. I'd like to turn this presentation over to Finance Director Hendrickson to discuss the details of the budget, and then Public Works Director Scott will show the information regarding the capital improvement budget.
Thank you, City Manager Letourneau. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you for having me here tonight as we go through the first presentation of next year's budget. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity for the public and council to ask questions, provide insight, and recommend any modifications that you see fit. The budget book in front of you and tonight's slideshow is the culmination of a lengthy budgetary analysis. We've incorporated into this book the needs of the community, directions from council, goals from the strategic plan, along with contractual obligations, salary and benefit projections, and funds for maintaining city assets. We are happy to report the budget is balanced. We project general fund revenues to be $45.4 million and expenditures to be $44.3 million, which is a difference of $1.1 million. This allows the city to further bolster our financial position by depositing $350,000 into our Section 115 trust and commit $750,000 towards increasing our reserves. Property tax and sales tax are the city's main revenue sources. Of the $45.4 million general fund revenues next year, property tax and sales tax make up 83% of that. We estimate property tax to total $24.8 million next year, a 2.9% increase from the prior year. It is common to see an annual increase between 2 to 4% in this category, and we feel confident with this estimate given the strong real estate market. As for sales taxes, we estimate to receive $12.7 million next year. This estimate came from HDL, the city's sales tax consultant. This represents a 5% increase from the prior year. This estimate reflects a city fortunate to have a well-balanced tax base, numerous commercial centers, and a local economy in the process of reopening. On this slide, you will see a 4-year general fund revenue historical trend. It is broken out into the 4 main categories of revenue, and the rest has been lumped together into the other category. This category includes other taxes, interest income, fines and forfeitures, and parks and recreation revenue. You can find a detailed breakdown of all general fund revenues on page 10 of your budget book. As for expenses, we project a budget of $44.3 million. This pie chart is a useful illustration of where the $44.3 million is going. It represents the council's priorities and strategic plan goals, with the bulk of money going toward public safety and public works. The full expenditure summary is found on page 9 of your budget. Similar to last year, we took the opportunity this year to find efficiencies in the way the budget is presented, reported, and utilized. We found it prudent to consolidate accounts that were similar in nature. As such, we consolidated printing and mailing, equipment, leases and maintenance, and trainings, meetings, and conferences. Various other department-specific accounts throughout the budget have also been combined. Denotations to indicate these actions have been included in the budget support pages. In these next few slides, we are going to highlight the specific facets of each department. The City Council budget next year includes an increased contribution to community organization grants, going from $50,000 to $60,000. Also, we programmed extra funds towards media outreach given the imminent return of events and other city functions. The administration budget includes an overall reduction in materials, supplies, and services from the prior year. The budget also includes funding for the Chamber of Commerce and the Friends of the Laguna Niguel Library. The city clerk budget has an overall decrease from the prior year. This is mainly due to the fact that election costs are only programmed every 2 years, mirroring the election cycle. There is a potential for a slight increase in records management, though, given the implementation of a new Laserfiche software and an increased need for scanning and virtual services. The city attorney's budget reflects a 2.9% increase, going from $350,000 to $360,000. This projected increase is due to a CPI inflation factor built into the existing contract. Actual costs will vary based upon usage. Non-departmental costs include expenses not easily attributable to one specific department, items like insurance, IT, and property tax admin fees. In this year's budget, two larger items, the unfunded accrued liability payment to CalPERS and the workers' compensation insurance premium, have been consolidated into this function. Doing it this way is more transparent for the reader and is easier for staff to track. Also, as with prior years, we have included a contingency line item of $400,000 for any unforeseen emergencies. The information technology function includes the consolidation of all communication costs for all city locations. It also includes $100,000 for a GIS upgrade related to the Smart Cities initiative, which will be described in more detail later tonight. The sheriff's contract is increasing approximately 3.34%. This is mainly due to increasing labor costs from the MOU negotiations at the county level and subsequently passed on to contracting cities. Also to note, the administration of the Animal Services contract with Mission Viejo is being transferred to the Parks and Recreation Department. The Community Development Department budget next year includes $375,000 for the initial phase of the general plan update. This is a multi-year project and has been identified as a high priority by the City Council in the strategic plan goals. Also to note, an increased staffing need has been identified. One full-time associate planner has been programmed in for next year. This will not increase the overall full-time employee count, though, as the staffing allocation for this position has been offset with a reduction from another department. This will bring the department more in line with pre-pandemic staffing levels. The Public Works Department budget next year is quite robust. It allows for the city to address deferred maintenance issues, along with the upkeep of all city infrastructure. There are funds programmed towards citywide painting, trail lighting improvements, the Salt Creek Habitat Monitoring and Mitigation Plan, a total cost of ownership project, an open space plan, and funds dedicated toward the Botanical Preserve. Other significant budgetary items include an assumed 5% increase in all utility costs, a new signal maintenance contract, and funds to upkeep City Hall, Sea Country, and the new community center at Crown Valley Park. With many buildings and operations slated for reopening, we anticipate increased usage in these facilities, and along with increased usage comes an increased need for building maintenance. The Parks and Recreation budget is reflective of the progressive reopening of its facilities and operations. Increases in revenue projections, which include rentals at the new community center, help support the department. Excluding the Animal Services contract, their budget has a reduction of $112,000 in materials, supplies, and services. This is partly due to the reduced costs in printing the recreation brochure. As part of the reopening of services and programs, we have included funds for special events, including the holiday parade and concerts. With every annual budget, we take a look at the level of staffing across all departments and suggest changes that best benefit the operations. Last year, we reduced full-time headcount from 69 to 62, and this year we plan to keep that full-time count the same, 62 full-time employees. However, we do recommend the following modifications. A recreation clerk reclassified to a recreation coordinator, a recreation manager reclassified to deputy director. In the Public Works Department, the contracts administrator reclassified to a senior civil engineer. In the Administration Department, the deputy city manager reclassified to the assistant city manager. And there is one interdepartmental transfers, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the Parks and Recreation Department from a recreation coordinator going to the Community Development Department to an associate planner. All of these recommended changes have been built into the proposed budget. So where does this all leave us? Our fund balance at June 30, 2021 is estimated to be about $40 million. With projected revenues of 45.4 and expenditures of 44.3, this leaves an estimated fund balance at June 30th, 2022 of 41.1 million. Furthermore, the 41.1 million balance is broken down into the following categories per our financial reserves policy. We have well exceeded the 50% threshold for economic uncertainty and emergency reserves. We will have put about $1 million into the Section 115 pension trust and have designated savings for deferred maintenance on city assets. At this point in time, the city would have achieved a 93% ratio of reserves compared to annual spending. And while there is no benchmark across government agencies, this ratio is very good compared to other cities. Finally, I want to mention the American Rescue Plan. This past March, the American Rescue Plan was passed in Congress to combat the negative economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This federal legislation provides $350 billion of aid to state and local governments. Laguna Niguel is slated to receive about $8.8 million over a 2-year period. As a point of clarification, the estimate in the proposed budget and the staff report is $8.2 million. This was the first estimate from the Treasury a couple months ago. All funds must be spent by the end of 2024. And as you're about to see in the capital improvement section of tonight's presentation, we plan to use these funds only on investments in city infrastructure. That concludes my presentation on the operating budget for next year. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Public Works Director Scott for a presentation on the capital improvement program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Hendrickson, Honorable Mayor, and members of the City Council. Tonight, I am presenting the fiscal year 2021-2022 Capital Improvement Program. However, first I'm going to present an update on 2 important topics: Smart City Initiatives and the Pavement Management Program. Both of these items are included in the Implementation Action Plan of the city's adopted strategic plan. Both of these topics are important because there's projects in the proposed fiscal year 21-22 Capital Improvement Program that are significant to accomplishing these cities' priorities. Smart City Initiatives are intended to improve service delivery and customer service satisfaction while creating new opportunities for engagement and problem solving for better shared outcomes. The Smart Cities Initiatives are accomplished through prioritizing a culture of innovation, a culture of customer service, and is founded on a culture of data. Smart City Initiatives are part of goal number 4 of the city's adopted strategic plan. They're intended to enhance transparency and engagement, enhance evidence-based decision-making, and are a foundation for fully utilizing technological advancements to benefit city residents. Smart City Initiative number 1 includes the installation of solar-powered electric vehicle charging stations. The installation of EV stations will be done in several phases in the CIP and over the next several years. Initially, the city will be purchasing 2 solar-powered EV charging stations, utilizing a grant from the state. The grant will fully fund this purchase. This initiative is intended to meet future customer needs as electric vehicles continue to gain market share. Smart City Initiative number 2 is the installation of an underground fiber optic cable connecting City Hall to Crown Valley Park. Staff is actively pursuing a grant to fund a substantial portion of this installation cost. This project will allow for a secured and rapid data connection between 2 key city facilities. This data connection will allow for operations at both facilities in the event of emergency. And this connection will also serve as the backbone for transmitting real-time traffic data to City Hall. Once a grant is secured and adequate funding is available to construct the data connection, the project will be brought forward to the City Council for inclusion in a future CIP. Smart City Initiative number 3 is the development of capital improvement project notifications. These notifications will be pushed out to interested Laguna Niguel residents regarding key milestones on high-profile CIP projects of significant importance to the public. Smart City Initiative number 4 is the implementation of live cams on select capital improvement projects available for public viewing through a portal on the city's website. This will be initiated as a pilot program to install video cameras on key projects where information in real time is most likely of benefit to the public. Smart City Initiative number 5 is the continued development of the city's geographic information system. This phase will include a portal for the public to access data directly from the city's website. The city currently has a GIS program housed in City Hall, but it requires that residents come into City Hall in order to access the data. This initiative will allow data to be accessed remotely. Next, I'm going to present information about the 2021 update to the pavement management program. The city owns and maintains 141 miles of streets. 104 miles are classified as local residential streets and 37 miles are classified as arterial streets. In 2018, the Public Works Department completed a 7-zone map to schedule a routine slurry seal program that covers the city. This map is available on the Public Works Department website. The pavement management program is a work plan that identifies road deterioration and needed projects to improve and maintain the pavement condition index. The pavement condition index is also known as a PCI, and PCI is a scale from 0 to 100, with 100 indicating the condition of a brand new street. The average PCI in Laguna Niguel is 80 for arterial streets and 79 for residential streets, which is considered an overall good condition. The pavement management program is included within goal number 4 of the city's adopted strategic plan. There are many benefits to having a pavement management program. Proactively executing the work plan improves the citywide PCI year over year. It satisfies the maintenance of effort reporting to OCTA and allows the city to secure Measure M turnback funds. It allows the city to save money by spending less to do more, and it meets the needs of the community by providing high-quality streets. This slide illustrates a recommended approach to adequately funding the projects identified in the pavement management program. In this scenario, funding is annualized that addresses the needs of both residential streets and arterial roadways. There are a number of roadway improvement projects in the proposed fiscal year 2021-2022 CIP that align with this recommendation. The city receives approximately $2.5 million each year in restricted roadway funds, which is substantially less than what is identified in the pavement management program recommendations. In order for the city to provide an adequate level of roadway maintenance, it is vital to implement cost savings measures that accomplish more maintenance at less cost. Combining slurry seal zones 1 and 2 into one contract is an example of such a cost savings measure. Bidding larger quantities into one contract reduces the unit prices and installs more slurry for each dollar invested into the program. For this reason, I have proposed a biennial approach to programming the slurry seal funding, which means for fiscal year 2021-2022, funding will not be allocated for the slurry seal project, but instead, zones 3 and 4 will be programmed together for construction in the summer of 2023. It is estimated the city could potentially save up to $1 million over the next 5 years by applying this cost savings measure. The 5-year CIP reflects this every other year approach to save the city money while meeting the goals of the 7-year slurry seal program. My third topic tonight is the proposed 2021-2022 capital improvement program. I am proud to report that for the current fiscal year 2021, the Public Works Department was successful in completing every committed milestone within the approved capital improvement program. Completed projects were done on time and within their allocated budgets. The restroom renovations at Sea Country, slurry seal zones 1 and 2, seepage repair on Paseo de Colinas, and the audible pedestrian push button installation work will continue into this summer, but all of these projects are scheduled for completion on time and all are on track to be completed within their approved budgets. I want to thank my staff in the Public Works Department, along with staff in Finance, Parks and Recreation, and Community Development for their part in this great accomplishment. There are 15 projects proposed in fiscal year 2021-2022, including facility projects, park projects, and roadway projects totaling over $5 million in funding requests. Whenever possible, grant funds, restricted third-party funds, and for the first time, an allocation of American Rescue Plan funds for projects delayed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic are allocated to pay the cost for these projects. The City Hall audio-visual equipment upgrade project is scheduled for completion in 3 phases. Phase 1 includes the installation of the Initiation of the project, including the completion of the design build specifications and the replacement of certain failed parts. Future phases will be funded and scheduled in the next 3 years, completing a total renovation and replacement of the system within the City Council chambers. The electric vehicle charging station project phase 1 will install new EV stations at the Metrolink station and at City Hall, utilizing a state grant and AQMD funds. Future phases of the project will add EV stations at Crown Valley Park, Sea Country Senior and Community Center, and other high-use city parks. City staff will continue to seek grants to cover construction costs for these projects. As part of this initial program, staff will be engaging in public outreach to garner interest and increase awareness of the new EV stations, while at the same time monitoring the stations for overall demand to make recommendations for a future EV charging station fee policy. Sea Country Senior and Community Center ADA improvements will upgrade items within the building, such as the wheelchair lift, counter height adaptations, drinking fountain replacements, and other items that improve ADA compliant accessibility. This project will be paid for with CDBG funds. Sea Country Senior and Community Center flooring upgrades will replace the aged and worn out carpet with upgraded non-skid ADA compliant tile throughout a significant portion of the facility. This project will be paid for with CDBG funds. The citywide voice over internet protocol telephone system upgrade project will improve customer service reliability by upgrading the legacy citywide phone system and moving it from analog to the voice over internet protocol digital system. Voice over internet protocol systems allow for better flexibility and lower overall costs, including the yearly maintenance and upkeep for support. The project scope will include migrating all existing telephone numbers, so there'll be no change for the community or internal staff, replacing all desk phones, conference phones, and telephone infrastructure with updated current technology, and training all staff on use of the new system. This project is funded by the American Rescue Plan. The Chaparosa Park Playground Replacement Project was delayed due to COVID-19 and will resume as scoped and approved by the City Council in 2019. The project will replace the play equipment, rubberized surfacing, picnic tables, benches, and improve drainage and ADA access around the play area. Along with Chaparosa Park, construction at the playgrounds of La Plata and Marina Hills will resume as well. These two projects were delayed as the result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and staff has been successful in securing a state grant since their delay in 2020. The city will receive approximately half the funding to complete these projects from State Prop 68 grant funds. Construction on all three playground projects is anticipated to resume this fall and be complete by next summer. The Crown Valley Park interim parking lot project will construct approximately 120 new parking spaces in the location of the softball field near the existing north lot. This project was delayed in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The project will add a decomposed granite surface, wood bumpers, planted medians, drainage improvements, and striping that will accommodate increased parking demands at Crown Valley Park as it reopens to programmed use. The Accessible Pedestrian Push Button Project will upgrade the pedestrian crossing signal buttons at 6 locations. This project is an annual installation funded through CDBG. So far, staff has improved 20 of the city's 84 signalized intersections and will continue around the city each year on a priority basis. The Alicia Parkway resurfacing from Highlands Avenue to Crown Valley Parkway is planned for the design phase in fiscal year 21-22 and will be recommended for construction in a future budget request. Marina Hills Drive resurfacing from Niguel Road to Golden Lantern is planned for the design phase in fiscal year 21-22 and will also be recommended for construction in a future budget request, likely in fiscal year 22-23. The Niguel Road resurfacing From Highlands to Alta Terra, construction phase project is recommended for funding in fiscal year 2021-2022. The project is already designed and is ready to advertise for bids. If approved by the City Council, construction will start next spring and be completed in the summer of 2022. The residential overlay program will provide asphalt resurfacing for failed residential streets that are damaged beyond a slurry seal repair. This annual project will address streets that are severely cracked and require rehabilitation through a grind and overlay to return the street to a new condition. The Pacific Island Drive Drainage and Wall Improvement Project will address drainage and runoff issues along Pacific Island Drive by installing a new concrete drainage structure to replace a temporary sandbag berm. This project is proposed for funding the design phase in fiscal year 2021-2022 and will be recommended for construction phase funding in a future CIP. That concludes my summary of the 15 projects proposed in the fiscal year 2021-2022 capital improvement program. This is an ambitious effort, but based upon the successes achieved over the past year, I am confident the Public Works Department will achieve these goals in the year ahead. That concludes my presentation this evening. I now turn the presentation back over to City Manager Letourneau.
In conclusion, I'd like to thank you, Mayor and City Council, for setting the vision for this budget through the adoption of the strategic plan. Developing this budget is a collaborative effort which involves employees at all levels of the organization. I'd like to thank our great team of department heads, department budget liaisons, and all employees who work together seamlessly to develop this budget. Most importantly, a very special thank you to our Finance Director, Eric Hendrickson, who spent countless hours putting together this very important document. We're looking forward to an outstanding year, and that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you very much for your comprehensive reports. I do have tons of questions, but let me, for the residents that are watching this budget workshop operating a CIP program tonight, how much money do we have in the bank by the end of this fiscal year 2021?
We're projected to have a general fund balance of about $40 million. All funds, which includes your special funds like gas tax and Measure M, would probably bring that to maybe 50 million-ish.
That also includes potential funding through SB1 ATP program from Sacramento,
Correct.
HSIP program from Washington, D.C., or from Sacramento, or even LRSP program, correct? Or have you applied for those?
Mayor Miniger, yes, we were recently successful in obtaining an LRSP grant from one of our traffic studies.
So we've been approved by CTC.
We actually have the agreement from the state coming to the City Council on a future meeting. I believe it's going to be May 18th that will allow us to secure the funds.
Very good, because they have cap funding for the cities in California. Okay, so I mean, I'm very proud of being fiscally conservative like all of my colleagues here. Over the past 6.5 years that I've served in the City Council, we always have maintained a very robust city budget, and we've always balanced our budget. That one of those fewest cities in Orange County that we are in a positive arena. Having said that, let me start off with the issue or the item on smart cities. I presume our Public Works Director, Jackie Scott, can answer my question. I serve on OCOG, Orange County Council of Governments, and we approved a major project that is being sponsored by SCAG. As a part of that, they are going to be providing GIS specifically and explicitly for OCOG, which is comprised of 34 cities in Orange County. The budget for that is between $1 to $2.1 million, depending upon potential expansion of the budgeting for that. And the main purpose of that was that I advocated along my colleagues there to provide those services to cities such as Laguna Niguel so that we can tap into that kind of system. So how do you think we can piggyback on that to save taxpayers' money under the one of the initiatives that I noticed would be expansion of our geographic information system, ArcInfo, and basically GIS.
Yes, thank you for that information. I believe earlier in the presentation, we saw that $100,000 was being allocated towards the GIS upgrades here at City Hall. If there are some other sources of funding available that we could use in order to further the development of that initiative, I'll be happy to look into that and make sure we secure our fair share of that.
Okay, so you need to coordinate that before you dive into expenditure of that. We are going to be voting on allocation of that funding, but that doesn't mean that, you know, you should be proceeding with that if we can take advantage of OCOG funding, SCAG funding, which is free money. Why not to use their system as much as we can so we can save that money and use it for other amenities for our citizens here. Then the next item is in reference to it's slide number 11, which is in the item number 2 under animal services contract. My understanding is that we are not partnering with the city of Mission Viejo anymore, correct?
We are partnering with the city of Mission Viejo. We
But
still have
then-
that contract.
But then the burden of administration is going to be in our city, or it's going to be split by 50-50.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer that question. So we've been in a contract with Mission Viejo since the mid-90s.
Right.
One of the goals that we established this year was to analyze that contract to see if we're getting our best value based upon what else might be out there. So that's one of the initiatives that we will be taking. The change that you mentioned in regards to police services to Parks and Recreation is just a transfer of what was already happening from police services to the Parks and Recreation Department. So there's no change in any of the levels of administration.
Understood. So what is the allocation of utilization of the program by the city of Mission Viejo against city of Laguna Niguel?
It's based on a percentage ratio of the population. I don't have the actual percentages in front of me, but I do believe we are out of all the cities that are involved, I think we're the third highest, with Mission Viejo paying the vast majority as the highest percentage.
Very good. Then moving on to staffing at Crown Valley Park. It is closed now, correct? I mean, by appointment only for the residents,
It's open for tours. We are
tours
June
only.
1st, we're starting to take reservations
right?
for rentals, but people can come in and slowly, as things were allowed to, there will be classes programmed in there.
Effective
Going
August
forward.
1st.
Yes, we start to
Okay.
do that August 1st. And the rentals as well.
And the first floor where the aquatic center is currently operable as well because the aquatic centers remained open.
So that leads me back to my initial question from a staffing perspective. We have full staff there at this juncture.
Yes, we're fully staffed. We have our recreation manager. An offer has been made. That person's in background, but once we fulfill that position, we'll be fully staffed there.
And he's going to be in charge of the facility, basically.
Yeah, the duties will be shared between the director and the manager.
He's
Yes.
the director. We're
Mhm.
referring to the manager.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So it's fully staffed and utilization is the same now versus after our fiscal year would commence July 1st, 2021.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then I get into the CIP programs. With regard to, let me start out with the smart city initiatives that Director Jackie Scott was elaborating on. Are we going to have e-plan amenity at the city hall? So for an applicant that comes to the community development department, they can submit their plans, PSNE plans electronically or with a new smart city initiative that you are proposing under this budget? Or that's a way to go in the future?
Mayor Miniger, I believe that there has been a system set up during COVID-19 where there is the ability for applicants to submit their applications electronically for Community Development Department. But I'd ask Director Orduña if he could elaborate a little bit on how that could be tied into a smart city initiatives in the future.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Are you referring to electronic plan submittal?
Yes.
We are looking at an initiative that is actually was baked into one of the strategic plan priorities. So that is something that we will be looking at this year.
So we're not allocating budget tonight for that?
Everything that is in our budget will cover completion of that strategic plan priority.
Okay, very good. As long as it's included there, I have no issues with that. Very good. Then I move on to the next item. This is in reference to EV charging stations. We're going to have them at Metrolink train station. We're going to have them at the City Hall, which is the City Hall parking lot, I take it. Are we going to be using EV Type 2 or EV Type 3?
Mr. Mayor, we have not entered into the design phase for those. That's part of the work plan in this next fiscal year. So the specifications are still forthcoming for that program.
From my experience in other cities, in other city halls, other city hall parking facilities, we have to learn from their lessons. And that is that I strongly advocate for as a part of your EV, which is one of your initiatives under the smart cities, to serve our citizens the best in the best fashion, to save them time, effort, energy. And then I talk about the monetary aspect of it would be that we use dual nozzles, regardless if it's going to be EV Type 1, EV Type 2 or EV Type 3. You go to the city of Irvine, you go to Irvine Spec Room, they have them there. It's basically there. You go to Mission Viejo Mall, they have them there. As long as it's double nozzle under that initiative for budget allocations, then I'm 100% in favor of that. That's for EV Type 2. For EV Type 3, obviously it's more expensive. EV Type 2 is roughly about $8,000. EV Type 3 is roughly about $27,000. And it depends on if you go with which one, which manufacturer, then it does vary. But I want to make sure that those EVs that I saw there, which is on slide number 23, it would be, I can't see it from here, but it would be dual nozzles, so two vehicles can use it at the same time. In our city, a lot of people drive Teslas and a lot of EV cars. We want to make sure that we serve them. And my other question related to EV would be, would it be free to the public?
Yes, so initially the intent is to install the new stations. Right now we have plugs available at Metrolink that are free to the public, so we'll just be continuing with that program. We'll be monitoring the use of the stations and bringing forward recommendations at a future date if that's warranted to adopt a new fee program.
And not to prolong the EV charging station subject at this juncture, this is not the appropriate forum for that. I'll be more than happy to sit down with you. Southern California Edison has special programs that we can piggyback on that, and it's free to the public agencies. And the other one is that electronic communication of EV vehicles with the city hall, that I want to make sure that we take care of it. There are cities that have issues with that. They were trying to economize. They use a lower brand, and they have all kinds of issues with regard to the transactions because the state and the federal government do pay for a lot of these programs. As you know, by the year 2030, we're going to have electric vehicles, manufactured and operated in California, which is a mandate by our current governor. Then moving on to, let's see. I noticed one thing about all the CIP programs. They're all slated for commencement beginning of January and then completing mid-year or end of the year. Why can't we expedite any of them with regard to going to bid?
So thank you for that question. In preparation for the program and the recommendations, my staff and I sat down and looked at every single project, and we outlined a schedule that you see in each slide
Right.
in the PowerPoint. I'd like to highlight for you a couple of projects that we are going to be starting very early in the fiscal year. Some of them we're going to be bidding out even in advance of July, just to have the bids ready to make recommendations to council as soon as the funding is available in the accounts. A couple examples of that where we are going to hit the ground running is the temporary lot out at Crown Valley Park. That project's already designed. It's on the shelf, and we'll be advertising it in June in anticipation of an award in July. Another example is the Nagel Road project. The reason why that one is designed and shelf ready, but the reason why we have it scheduled to start in the spring is because we need to wrap up the slurry program in the neighborhoods, which will extend through October. We essentially take a break over the holidays and start up right again after the holidays with our paving program in the springtime. So there are several projects that we're going to be able to hit the ground running. And all of these are timed to accommodate the seasonal requirements on the projects, the staffing levels that we have in the department, as well as the availability of our consultants to assist us in the proper oversight and execution of the projects. A couple of these projects are also design phase only, and we'll be making recommendations for the next fiscal year. They will not be going to construction in the current 21-22 plan that we have.
Very good. Then I have one staffing question on one of the city managers' proposed staff allocations. I noticed that one contract administrator in the Public Works Department is going to be the title classification is going to be changed to senior civil engineer. This person is a civil engineer?
We actually don't have that person on staff at this time. It's the contract administrator position has been vacant most of the year. We're recommending to upgrade it to a senior civil because Public Works last year cut that position along with another licensed engineer position. The workload is still there to demand a senior civil position, so we are proposing to recruit for that to help us in the implementation of this entire CIP.
Then on the same subject matter, I want to make sure the person is a CE in California.
It will require an engineering license at the time of application.
Very good. Now, turning it over to our dynamic finance director, we are going to be getting from Biden administration about $8.8 million, if I understand it correctly. And it's going to be used until 2024. It has to be used only for the CIP programs.
It doesn't have to. That's the recommendation. There are strings attached to these funds, but it's one-time money. And I have proposed to you a philosophy of only using it for one-time projects. If you'll notice in the descriptions in the CIP, it refers to delayed COVID projects.
Right.
We just got 150 pages of all the rules. We are digesting that, but we are confident the projects we've proposed to you fit within the American Rescue Plan regulations, and we'll be bringing forward to you in future CIPs additional things as we sift through these complicated regulations we have to deal with.
And to be honest with everyone, I understand that the federal government is printing money basically to trickle down to all these cities and states. But putting that aside, the money is going to come to this city. I, for one, want to make sure that that money would be used for any kind of amenities that our residents can enjoy from the successful implementation of that. It should not be used for something else that is going to be, you know what I mean? It's going to disappear. Something that people of this great city can see it, can use it. I don't know what. We don't know which project. It has not been decided yet. I understand that. But that's my personal, I guess, request, that money to be used for that, to be used for something like that that people can enjoy. With that, I'm going to just conclude my comments and thank you for my colleagues' indulgence to listen to all my questions. I'm going to start from all the way from my left side
Straight out of the
for a
gate,
big
right?
reason.
Very good.
Okay, Councilman Sharma, the floor is 100% yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So having gone through this, first, I want to acknowledge the staff and the team for putting so much work into this. I've seen the prior budgets, and this is much more consolidated view, much more understandable and comprehensible as far as being able to break down the analysis and find out where the monies and things are flowing. With that being said, I do kind of want to home in on a few points for clarification. Initially, maybe this can go to Public Works Director Jackie Scott. The electric and solar program that we have, from my understanding in San Juan Capistrano, and as the mayor's pointed out, the experience from surrounding cities, which we can learn a lot from. The challenge has been being able to service the number of vehicles that have been going through there without public disruption, to the extent where they've had to hire on individuals to staff that location and monitor the utilization of those services. Have we given any thought as to maybe how that program would develop, and then beyond that, keeping flexibility with changing technologies? And then the third iteration of that comment or question, if you will, is the ability for us to preference our residents relative to the costs that we'll be encumbering, namely the cost of electric. I noticed some of these are solar, which that should be self-sustaining, but when it comes to the cost of electric that goes into these, our residents are going to be paying for that unless we get grant funds from someplace to sustain the program.
Thank you, Councilman Sharma. Those are all very good questions. This project is phased over multiple years, and we already have some charging ports down at the Metrolink station. So we are offering charging stations already. So staff's been observing how those are being used, and understand that some policy is probably going to be needed in the future as we expand this program. Because it's phased, it's going to give us some time to observe, how they're being used by the residents before we then install the next phase and specify new technology or upgrade the technology as time wears on. But when we bring the project forward to council, we'll also be considering what's necessary for a future policy to meet the needs of the residents to prevent some of the issues that you've described. They are very popular when they're put in, and especially when there's an initial no charge, it really brings the public interest very quickly to the fact that they exist. So we'll be bringing something forward to address all of those questions and all of the use issues that might come up with providing this as a service to the public.
Thank you. The kind of staying with you for a little while, the interim parking, can you talk to us a little bit about the cost history of that program? I noticed that we have $600,000 allocated towards that in the budget. Historically, my understanding is the cost was less than that at one point. That's my initial question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So this project was conceived during the construction of the Crown Valley Park Community Building. It was intended to be constructed towards the very tail end of that construction of the building so that it could be available to the public when the new building was opened, and with all the new programming that would come with it, we knew the parking demand would increase substantially. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the building use to the public was curtailed suddenly, so this project was shelved. Before we shelved it, it did go to bid. This was in early 2020, and the engineer's estimate was $255,000 at that time. The low bid came in substantially higher than that. We received 6 bids. The low bid was around $350,000, and then it went on up to almost $500,000. So we used that information from the bid to recommend the $600,000 allocation in the CIP, proposed CIP tonight, in order to adapt to market conditions, not an engineer's estimate that was aged and quite frankly a little too low at the time when it was bid as well. But the design of the project hasn't changed from early 2020. This is what council approved. We still have it, and we're going to put it back out to bid and without any further changes to the program.
Thank you. Kind of piggybacking on that question, Parks Director Ron Rivera, we had a conversation over the tour sessions about the number of spaces that we have available within the infrastructure now and what you foresee as the capacity that we actually need there. Can you talk to us a little bit about that before I move on to the second?
Sure. Obviously, before the Cran Valley Community Center had been open, we had a very busy park at Cran Valley Park. With the addition of the Cran Valley Ballroom, 3 to 4 classrooms, the Overlook Deck, and the Aquatic Center, we do see our capacity at the center and use of the center multiplying by 4 times based upon programming and reservations at the center. So this new parking lot will ease some of that because we also have Botanical Preserve, sports field. It's a full functioning park. So we're looking to ease some of those parking problems as well with this project.
Okay, and then the last part of this question, seems like a long question, doesn't it? Is directed at our city manager, Tammy Letourneau. The ARP program, the American Rescue Plan program you mentioned was we needed to spend these dollars. It's coming in 2 segments, my understanding, right? The first allotment now and then another subsequent allotment of dollars. All of those dollars have the same time frame assigned to them, December 31st?
All of it has to be spent by December 31st, 2024.
Okay, so and as you've pointed out already, these dollars do not have to be spent on CIP projects, but the direction is towards previously approved projects. I guess my question would be then, definitionally, how are they assessing previously approved project? And I'm asking from the standpoint that this project started out at a significantly lower amount. Now we're spending $600,000. My hesitancy initially would be we don't have any comparables, meaning for a more permanent structure. The initial understanding was that we were going to put in a temporary structure that would coincide with the initial opening. We're 12 months past that. By the time this gets going, we'll be another 6 months past that for a total of 18 months. We could be working simultaneously on something else to use these dollars with. That would be, number one, a more permanent structure if we understand the definition properly. And then it also coincides with what our mayor has mentioned about adding more functional amenities for our community.
Right. So the American Rescue Plan funds, it does not specify that the dollar amount that you had to have or an engineer's estimate at the time the project was delayed. It's not that specific. It's making sure it's tied to loss of revenue. So we put this project on hold because of the pandemic. So it's directly tied to the fact that we didn't get to, it would have been built and constructed already had COVID not happened. So we can tie it directly back to that. So it doesn't specify in terms of dollars that you were estimating to spend. It's just project related. Yes, we've talked about other things out there addressing other parking needs. We are going to be conducting a feasibility study this year to look at a possible parking structure, for example, whether it's possible, how much it might cost, but parking structures are extraordinarily expensive, more than the American Rescue Plan funds would be able to pay for, even if it was allowed. And we couldn't, timing wise, we can't do a feasibility study, design it, bid it, and construct it by December of 2024. So, anything we're talking about in terms of a parking structure will be longer term and we'll have to save for to address. So, but this temporary parking lot addresses a serious need that we have, that we will have as soon as we open that building. So
I think my only hesitation is just the not having the ability to put 600,000 into perspective relative to what, right? Is it $2 million or $3 million that we need? And if it takes us how many years to save that $2 or $3 million to put in a more permanent structure, how far are we pushing off the real need?
Make sure I understand your question, but I suspect, and this is a ballpark, that a parking structure will cost between $10 to $15 million.
Okay.
So we're talking about a significant amount of money.
Okay.
And we do have a nice healthy reserve at the time we come forward to you. We plan to bring a plan to you in the next CIP, depending upon the results of the feasibility study, if it's possible. If not, we'll work on some other plans to bring forward. And this next year will give us a great indication of the exact parking needs out there. And is that necessary as we start to do rentals and things? And we're allowing valet service and shuttle services and all kinds of things to address it. So I don't want anyone to get scared that they shouldn't have an event there. We do have parking, but this is a big priority, and we're going to make sure that we do it right, and we do it right the first time. And we might have to save a little while for the longer term plan if that's possible.
Perfect. That fits within the agenda of the city historically and currently, right? Okay, so thank you for that. Moving on, there were some points in here on cell tower, which, you in the budget you have listed as rents. In our analysis, some vendors are paying more than other vendors. Maybe you can give us some background on when the series of negotiations come up for towers. I know there's been a lot of conversations of 5G. A lot of the applications are for 4G, just for a point of clarification. But these are revenue sources to the city. So talk to me a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yes, I'm actually going to turn over to Jonathan Orduña, who has firsthand knowledge of the details of those programs.
Sure. In terms of future facilities future applications that we anticipate coming our way and revenues from those facilities, the FCC has put regulations in place that cap the rents that can be collected. So currently for new facilities, you'd be looking at about $270 a year per facility. So the leases that we have in place right now, I think they're averaging around $1,500 to $1,600 a month. So that is a thing of the past. So we will no longer be seeing those types of revenues. And that is also, the rent can only be collected for facilities that are located on city facilities, city streetlights. We only own about 10% of our streetlights. So the majority of these facilities will be located on SCE and SDG&E streetlights. So we won't even collect the $270. They will actually be the landlord that is leasing space. So this has been an evolving process over the last decade and a half, and bit by bit, the city's ability to exercise land use control of those facilities, and certainly to look at this as a revenue generator has been significantly restricted.
Seems like a reoccurring issue. So just to kind of drill down on that a little bit, that's a potential loss in the future of about $386,000 based upon projected revenue to the city.
Correct. We have, I think with the current facilities, the leases that we have in place, the earliest of those was executed in 2009. And those leases with option periods total about a 20-year term. So for the earliest of those facilities, we're just a little over halfway through, but eventually in the next decade, they will begin to phase out. And talking with carriers, oftentimes for those existing facilities, they have enough of an investment that they are willing to continue with those agreements and continue making those payments rather than decommission the facilities and install new facilities. So it may be that the rent continues, but it may not. So.
Well, there's also COLAs on those. So when they renew, there would be an annual, not all of them, but just speak generally right now, maybe there's a 5% increase or a 3% increase per annum on
3% for all right-of-way facilities.
Okay, so 10 years from now, we're not talking about 386,000. We're talking about more significant sum there.
That's right.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's actually, I think, very insightful for everybody to know. The VoIP programs or VoIP upgrades, it's kind of interesting reflecting back on the conversation of our solar panels. That's a perfect example of how technology changes, and this building already needing upgrades here. Don't really have any comment on that, but I think it's a great idea to do, and it adds more accessibility and technology infrastructure. Just kind of a side question to Public Works Director, again, Jackie Scott, and maybe Ron Rivera, Parks Director as well. The playground equipment that'll be removed from the facilities, are those donated, or what happens with those?
The contractors haul them off and dispose of them. If you're talking about the existing play equipment, it's nearly 20 years old. It generally doesn't meet current standards, and so donating that, there's probably not too many organizations that would be open to that kind of donation. So we have the contractors just haul them off and dispose of them.
Okay, thank you. Now over to Finance Director Eric Hendrickson. The staff reclassifications that you mentioned, maybe you want to move us back to that screen.
Of course.
There were a handful of them. How many of those, by reclassifying the employees, increased the payroll associated with the jobs that they were doing.
I can speak to that, Councilmember Sharma. I'll actually just go right down the list there. So for the recreation clerk position, that's now a vacant position that just became recently vacated. The recreation coordinator position will now be the person who is responsible for the rentals at Crown Valley Park. That does come with a higher salary. However, there will be a higher return on the city's investment in that position because rental revenue will increase because there will be a full-time dedicated person to that. The recreation manager to the deputy director, all of the rest of them, they all come with an increase. However, there is obviously increased duties that come with the reclassifications. It's increased duties resulting in the increase to the payroll.
Okay, that concludes my questions. I thank you everybody for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sharma. Now we go to Mayor Pro Tem Elaine Genoway. We're going this way.
Okay. Didn't know what you were doing, if you're going to go side to side
I
or
always
down
want
the
a
line.
surprise.
That's it. You're full of surprises, Mayor. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank City Manager Letourneau and the staff for putting all this together. We know there's a lot of work that goes behind this presentation and this budget that you've given us. And, if it's not in the budget, it doesn't get done this coming year. And not only is a lot of work went into the budget, but I think when we look at our budget, we can also see all of the work that went into the strategic plan a couple of years ago, and then the refresh of the strategic plan that we just did a few months ago. That really sets the priorities. And isn't it wonderful to see that all of it reflected in here? Like, yay, everyone was listening. So, and I'm glad to see that in here you recognize, priority of the city council was the general plan update. There's a significant expenditure in here. It's keeping with goal 5 of our strategic plan, and we'll see that for about the next 4 years or so. But we do need to set that money aside for our strategic plan update. Also, a lot of the communication items that are in here. And I have some questions, and I'll start with, most of my questions were taken. Wait till you get down to that end. You're not going to have any questions left. But let me, Director Scott, I have if you could just clarify, because I know one of the items that you mentioned, it's on slide 25, Smart City Initiative number 3, Notify Me. And you mentioned Notify Me, and many of our residents, Notify Me means something to them because they go on the city website, they click that to notify me to receive emails. So for any residents that are listening, could you please clarify how this may be different or enhanced, or is it the same as the Notify Me we're currently using?
Actually, we will look for some synergy with any existing programs that we have. But looking into this, if there's a particular project in someone's neighborhood, there's an ability for them to go in and sign up for notifications. That way we can push out some real-time information to those particularly interested residents on that project. And then once the project is over, those notifications would then stop. They just wouldn't be getting notifications on every city project just randomly, so that they could be much more targeted types of information. That's the idea behind the Smart Cities Initiative, is very closely targeting the information to the right person at the right time.
Okay, great. Thank you. Another question I have is regarding the pavement management program on slide 33. And I greatly appreciate when you brought the pavement program to us. Was it a meeting ago or 2 meetings ago, where you've consolidated some years because of the, what I call the, what do we call? I'm drawing a blank on the large
Economies-
scale pricing.
Oh, the economies of scale.
Economies of scale. Thank you. So when we do that, and we realized a savings when you're combining a couple of the zones and the projects, because the contractors are already out here, they're doing the work, they're able to give us a lower per unit price. So that is a great benefit to the city. One of my questions and concerns, though, is because aside from the aesthetics of having nicely paved roads, it's also a safety factor. And if we're delaying a zone for another year, is there any type of an assessment that's done on the streets
to see if there's anything for safety consideration that needs to be done until we get to it because it's been delayed?
That's a very good question, and thank you for that. The every other year program will still accomplish the 7-year cycle within the 7 years. It just skips a year and then does 2 zones together in 1 year. We are regularly inspecting and monitoring the streets all around the city on a routine basis and to try and find any safety issues. And we also are very responsive if a resident calls us up and says, hey, I have a concern about a pothole forming on my street or a crack that seems to be getting bigger. We go out and address those types of situations immediately. So no type of safety issue would go unaddressed for any length of time under the work program.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have is on slide 16 and referring to the pie chart and the deferred maintenance. Do we have specific projects identified, or is that for a deferred maintenance fund for as the need comes up throughout our city?
I can
Because you
answer,
have streets and other assets.
I can answer that one. We have a financial reserves policy, and it dictates in there at the end of the year pretty much how we divvy up the fund balance, what's left over. The bulk of it go into this economic uncertainty, emergency reserves, and then there's a percentage allocated towards deferred maintenance of streets and the deferred maintenance of other assets. There's no specific street or asset towards that. This is more of a conceptual reserve policy that allows us to see, we have funds in the bank, and as a council, our policy was to put a certain percentage of that towards streets or other assets.
Okay, good. Yeah, and that's something that I'm very concerned about, and I know my colleagues are too, with our aging city. People back east will laugh at us when we say a 32-year-old city is aging, but we do need to be considering any maintenance on our facilities to keep them up. So thank you for that answer. And another question I have is actually not regarding CIP, but it is in the regarding the usage of the general fund, and it's specifically for City Manager Letourneau. I'd like to ask our Chief of Police Services, Chief Asuncion. I remember sitting here with Mayor Minigar in 2017 and 2018, and it was a lot of work to get to that point of adding new deputies. Quite frankly, there was some resistance to that, but there was a great need in the community for some more deputies on the street, and specifically in the area of traffic. So in 2017, we added 2 more, and then 2018, we added 2 more. Well, I know over the years, those numbers have changed because of the way the Sheriff's Department is doing the staffing with the headquarters, and then sharing positions with other cities, and then taking a look at overtime versus hiring another deputy. So those numbers have changed over time. And our number one goal in our city strategic plan is public safety. And so the adjustments that I mentioned, I just want to make sure that our law enforcement headcount is right-sized for our city, and we have not gone back to the pre-2017 service level. Now, if you've been in Laguna Niguel for a while, and it just takes a few months to know, we're very sensitive about headcount. But we're also, we also prioritize public safety. So about 35% of our general fund expenses are for the sheriff's contract. So I want to make sure that what we have in here is, and I know the contract hasn't come before us, that'll come to us, next month?
June 1st with the budget.
Okay, so that'll be coming to us. But we are looking at the dollar allocation here in this budget. Is this appropriate? Is our law enforcement team, is that right size for the needs of Laguna Niguel, or should we anticipate something different?
I could probably say that we are fully staffed. You mentioned traffic, and we are fully staffed with our traffic units as well. And it's my belief that we maintain our current staffing levels to maintain the current customer service that we give to the city.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we don't have any surprises, but also you know that we prioritize public safety here. So thank you. Thank you. And that is it, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you very much. Before I move on to Councilmember Sandy Rains, to piggyback on Mayor Pro Tem's question, I had that question on my list. As you well know, 37.9% of the total budget goes to our contract with Orange County Sheriff Department, and we have been very pleased with the services that has been provided to us, along with a total of 13 South Orange County cities. Having said that, every year that I've been sitting in in this chamber, we always were talking about adding motorcycle officers. So let me get it correct. You are not going to come here during the next meeting to request for additional motorcycle officers. Safety job number one in this city. All of us agree in that, but I just want to make sure.
Yes, sir. We are not requesting another motor officer.
Because I was thinking of BMW motorcycle officer, the cost was roughly,
It was high.
it was high, 120 some thousand, $127,000 or so. I just want to make sure.
That is correct, sir.
Very good. Sorry, I stole the time from my colleague, Councilmember Sandy Rains. Now the floor is 100% yours. Yes, she's done.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It is wonderful to sit and look at what has been produced by our staff. I really appreciate the hard work that went into it. I especially appreciate the fact that you broke it out this year to be even more transparent than we have been in the past. Identifying our pension obligation under a separate category instead of putting it into the salaries, I think was a big thing that really made a big difference for me, because the first thing I did was look at it and it looked like the retirements were going down, and then it was clarified that we had removed that from across the board in our departments to identify what the real pension obligation was. So it kind of aligns with us forming the 115 Trust and our value toward that. One of the questions I had asked our city manager was the reasoning for putting more into reserves as opposed to the 115 Trust, because it's something that we all are wanting to make sure that we take care of the pension obligation. It's the only per se debt that we might have as a city, and not for any fault of our own planning. But it was, I appreciated you sharing and clarifying that the value is placed on putting it into our reserves because they're unrestricted, and we do have enough in our reserves to pay off our pension obligation if we had to at any time. And so this gives us an opportunity to plan for it, but also to build our reserves for other items that we might want to use funding for to meet the needs of our city. So I really appreciated that. One of the things that I noticed on our budget, and we've talked about this in past city council meetings, is the increase of our sales tax revenue. And Director Hendrickson and I have gone back and forth and talked about this quite a bit. And it was it's about a 5% increase, but in looking at our CPI, the indicator shows that it's about a 5.5% increase across the board. So in that case, even though our sales tax revenue has gone up, the indicator might show that it's just because cost of goods have gone up because of the COVID pandemic. So I appreciate the fact that you're remaining very fiscally conservative and watching how we spend the dollars going forward, because it's not necessarily a windfall for us. It might have just shown up that way this time, but it really isn't. With that being said, the amount of money that we're getting from the American Rescue Bill has increased, and we're now approving a budget with our previous number because all this work went in to place prior to those figures coming in. So do you have any kind of a plan for what you're going to do? Will that money be placed in reserves for the time being? What is your plan for the additional funds we'll be receiving this year?
So if you notice in the list of projects, we are only using, what's the total this year in front of me?
It's about two and a half.
2.5 million of the 8.8 million. The rest will program for future years. But one of the things philosophically that's really important to me is that I only present you with a budget with CIP projects that we can complete in the year that we promised that they will be done. And you heard Director Scott give you that wonderful news that we are on time, on budget with the projects that we said in this year we would complete. And that is something to be very proud of.
Yeah.
And I am extremely proud of the staff for being able to do that. This list of CIP projects we're presenting to you tonight is the list we feel we can complete in the year and continue with that. So we have not budgeted all of it. We will continue. We have a few years to do that. And so we will get the money, as was said earlier, in 2 chunks, and we will hold that money aside in a separate account. So because we have to be responsible and accountable to the federal government on reporting where we spend it. And there's all kinds of paperwork we'll fill out, but we will track this on a separate track. You'll see American Rescue Plan funds in future CIPs as long as it's allowed.
Okay. And to follow up with that, you did say it's 150 pages. So I think it would be very important for us as a council to have some kind of a summary of what is allowed and what is not. So I know that it's going to take you some time to process that, but if we could be working on
We're working
presenting
on that.
something
And
to us
of course,
on
not
that
all of
so
it
that-
is crystal clear.
Right. I
So some of
understand.
it requires that we get clarification. So we are working on a memo to you that will simplify in a lot less than 150 pages, maybe like 2, what we can use these funds for. So that's coming.
I'd appreciate if maybe we could do that publicly so that the public also is aware of that money, because sometimes we might have residents who think we should use the money for something else, and
We can
it'd be
put it
kind of
on our
nice for them to
website
know what we're
also.
limited to.
We can put it on the website also in the financial section with the budget when we create it. So
Okay.
it'll always be a reference.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so then my next question is on the change of staffing, the staffing changes. It's page 14. So I heard you say that there is an offer out for a recreation manager, and you're saying you're changing recreation manager to deputy director. So do we have multiple recreation managers? We're hiring a new, okay, so this is why I heard that comment saying that there's an offer for a recreation manager, but at the same time, you're simultaneously hiring someone as a recreation manager and then turning them into a deputy director? I'm kind of confused about that. Could you clarify that?
I'm happy to take that question, Councilmember Rains. There is an offer out for the recreation manager recruitment, which is just wrapping up. The structure of the department, since there's been a lot of changes in the last year with the different leadership, as well as with animal services going to the department in a new facility. The role of the manager will be substantially more involved, really overseeing the day-to-day operations of the department more so than the manager has done in the past, which leads to the classification change to the deputy director. Deputy director, it's not a new classification, it's just been unfunded. All of the positions that are actually listed there are existing classifications. They come and go depending on the needs of the city and the staff that are brought in. Depending on what's funded for the year. And the recommendation is to make that the recreation manager position into the deputy director position due to the increased day-to-day oversight of the department.
Okay, I understand that part, but what I don't understand is that you're offering somebody a position as the recreation manager, and you're asking us to change their qualification prior to them even being hired. So I'm not sure that I think that's an appropriate way to do that.
So the classification as it was listed on the job recruitment was for recreation manager, which is what the existing position was. The intent would be in a 90-day review process to move towards the deputy director position if it's approved by the city council.
So I think then at that point would be the appropriate time to come to us and ask us to reclassify a position. I don't think we should be doing it ahead of time. I don't know. I mean, I understand, but
We didn't want to wait on the the recruitment because there is a dire need in the department, obviously, with
I
things
understand
returning
that,
very
yeah.
quickly. And generally during the budget process is the time when we bring reclassifications.
I
That's
wouldn't
why-
have an issue with it if it was someone who was already working for us and we had some prior knowledge of their experience and their performance. But because they haven't even started working for us yet, I find it to be a little bit presumptuous to do that. And I understand we're in the budget process, but you're hiring them as a recreation manager, so the salary range is being offered as a recreation manager. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
But,
Go ahead. Yeah.
But did you say on a 90-day performance review, then it could possibly be changed? So they're not being hired right away as the deputy director. They'd be hired as the recreation manager. And then if their performance meets the standards of a deputy director, then that would be their title?
That's correct.
Thank
I
you.
will say our candidate pool was exceptionally strong. We have past directors from other cities who've been part of the pool. I think anyone who we would have went with in our top 3 list of candidates, and if Mr. Rivera is interested in commenting, you certainly can, would have been very strong candidates for the deputy director title.
What's the salary range difference?
$9,033
At
to
less than $10,000.
$11,631.
That's okay. So a couple thousand a month. Okay. And did you want to chime in, Director Rivera?
I would echo Deputy City Manager Justin Martin's comments. Our candidate pool was exceptionally high. All the candidates who made the final 3 definitely have the experience to be a director, a deputy director, and so we have a strong candidate pool. And I feel very strongly that the candidate would be able to accomplish the goals that were set for the city in this position.
So if they were to accept the job, they wouldn't be offered the promotion to deputy director for at least 90 days. Is that correct?
That's correct. One other
Okay.
thing I'll mention, with some of these vacant positions, we're moving from the 2 at 55 tier to the 2 at 60 or the 2 at 62 with some of the candidates. So there is a cost saving there, obviously, for a long term due to the pension tier change.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is regarding the classifications again. City Manager Letourneau, when you came to our city a couple years ago, you evaluated the position of deputy city manager to assistant city manager, and you said that it made sense for the city to hire a deputy city manager, and now you're recommending a staff reclassification to assistant city manager. Can you talk a little bit about what's changed in our city that makes you want to reclassify that position?
Yes, absolutely. So it was actually, I knew coming in that the current deputy city manager would be retiring and I would need to recruit. What the office looked like and how it was structured 2 years ago is completely different than it is today. The needs of the city have changed, the council goals have changed, and so I've completely revamped the office in terms of job duties. And so at the time, I did determine that it was important to recruit for the deputy city manager. However, over time, those duties have changed, and the person in that position, and I'm not going to pretend like he's not sitting next to me,
know.
is sitting next to me, has done an excellent job and really is functioning today as a true assistant city manager. So it's important that we, in all of these reclassifications, that we have the job titles and the salary schedules that go along are commensurate with the duties that we're asking them to do. And so that is what we're proposing to you, top to bottom, is a true reflection of what we're having these folks do. And that's the right thing for me to be recommending to you in terms of our structure.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Okay. I'm going to go to page 17 on the American Rescue. Oh, I already asked you for the summary on the guidelines for the restrictions and the cost, so that'll be great. So now I'm going to go over to Director Works Scott on page 22. This is really fascinating, all this smart city stuff, and there's some wording in here that I kind of want to have some clarification on. So one of the things that you said, we're going to move to evidence-based decision making. Can you define what they mean by that?
Yes, Councilmember Rains. The underpinning driver of a smart city initiative is truly data and the ability to collect more data and collect it more quickly, be able to process it quickly, and then make better informed decisions that then have a positive impact in the community. So with the technology advancements that we have been able to take advantage of, with Wi-Fi and faster computers and cameras and everything else that exists in the world today, is an opportunity for the city to collect that type of real-time data and to be able to use that to the benefit of the community, to be able to push that data out so they can make better decisions for themselves as well. That's sort of the big picture idea behind it.
Thank you. I know that one of the other things that you talked about was doing underground fiber optics from City Hall to our community center. And my question that I had on that was, what about Sea Country? That's also one of our properties, and there would definitely need to be a communication through there. So is that something that's even possible? And would that even be something that we considered?
The two primary city facilities are City Hall and Crown Valley Park Community Building. We also have a dual purpose for that underground connection. It will connect our traffic signals, and we'll be able to collect real-time traffic signal data through that. And so that one is more easily constructed and funded through a grant. Sea Country is much farther away. It's a little more off the beaten path compared to Crown Valley Parkway and the amount of traffic and use. So it would be a lower secondary priority as we go through these initiatives, but potentially in the future it could be added. Yes.
It could. Okay, thank you. I just was curious about that. I also wanted to thank you for the pavement management. I mean, this has been something that our city has really needed, and I appreciate that you've spent the time that you have putting it together and that we're already seeing the fruits of that starting this year. So in the last project that we did for Zone 1 and 2, there was a real significant amount of difference. We had talked about that with the bid coming back on the contract with almost quite like $1 million. So we added things to it. You had at that time said that the next project would probably be closer to $3 to $4 million. So are we using engineer estimates for that? Or what are we using to estimate what that cost is going to be so that we are getting, and you said that we're saving money by doing it in 2 years, but what are we going to be using to gauge that so we stick within that?
So yeah, the pavement management program, the amount of streets that we have are pretty stable. We're not really adding new neighborhoods, and we're at a fairly built out state here in the city. So the quantities that I gave you tonight with the centerline miles of streets is pretty consistent year after year. So it's a matter of tracking the market costs. And we do the best we can to see what other cities around us are paying for a similar type project in order to validate an engineer's estimate. So with oil prices potentially increasing, with prevailing wage and wages in general increasing over time, I do expect that the cost to maintain our streets will increase over time. And one way that we can counter that is by packaging together projects that will help us save some money, which is the 2-zone approach that I was presenting to you tonight.
That's a great idea. I appreciate that a lot. So thank you. The other question I had was, if we do go to a VoIP VoIP system, this is always one of my concerns. You know, we do everything like Wi-Fi, internet, and then all of a sudden we have a major power outage, which is not unlikely to happen in California. We do have those things. What would be the backup system that we would use for safety for our community?
So we also do have backup generators here at City Hall and our other city facilities that do continue to power the essential functions of the building should there be a power outage. Also, most staff is equipped with cell phones in the case of an emergency, as well as the emergency responders with their radio systems as well.
If I may just chime in on that really
Yeah.
quickly, because we use these systems in my office as well for quite some time. Whenever we've had power outages, everybody's able to access whatever voicemail systems they have from the cell phone using the existing line that they would otherwise have had within the city. So it's not going to be, they're calling from their cell phones to address issues.
Okay.
If I can add one other item to
Yeah.
that, that was very important, especially during COVID. And if there is an emergency in the building or for some reason staff can't access the building for some type of catastrophic event, with our current system, we actually can't update the system remotely, which is a major deterrent from being able to update messages and notifying the public if they are calling our numbers. With the new system, that was one of the main things that we saw as an immediate advantage, was that we would be able to remotely access the system off-site if we weren't able to be on-site, which we can't do now.
That's a really good benefit for us. Okay, thanks. I'm glad for that clarification. Director Rivera, you had mentioned that the use for the parking for the city, the new community center, was going to be 4 times, but so I'm just wondering, like, is the interim parking structure going to be adequate to meet the initial needs for the time being?
Well, it's going to be important the first few months of operations that we're quantifying and all the parking being used for our first big events, our sporting fields, and really trying to put that schedule together and to see how it's working out. So those first 4 months of operation will really give us a better explanation. And we're going to have staff every event look at the parking and where we're at, how many spaces are being used, how many spaces are available. As we're booking a big ballroom per se, we would maybe not doing some smaller classes or have a dive meet. So there is going to be some 4, 5, 6 months of just quantifying the parking and our needs from there. But this would be definitely a very good first step in that direction.
I just wanted to be on record as saying that originally we were told 255, and the comment was made that it would have been constructed based on what we had voted on, but that's not true, because we don't know that we would have voted for a contract that was that much over. We might have sent it back out for bid. So I'm okay with us doing this. I just want to make sure that, I guess since we're using the American Rescue Plan, but when contracts come back that much higher than what we estimated or whatever, that's usually not something that our city traditionally just says okay to. So I just want to make sure that we know that for future. One of the other final questions I had was on the parks assessment completion date. Can you remind us of when that might happen?
The needs assessment,
Uh-huh.
and we're having a kickoff meeting in June, and it's originally supposed to be completed by next summer,
So
next June.
So next year, so one of the things, I know that we're doing a lot of the projects that were put on hold from our parks, but with the parks assessment, there were some other projects that we delayed that were community improvements and community benefit projects. And I just want to mirror our mayor's request that I think that those are the projects that we would want to use that American Rescue Plan money for, is the projects that had been put aside. And with using the parks assessment, obviously, once we have that, we'll know even more so what of those projects. We might even get a senior fitness park.
That is the plan that we're still
So,
working.
right.
That is the plan. We're still working through that list.
Yeah, okay. So I just wanted to mirror those comments, because I think it's critical that when the staff is planning, that they're keeping that in mind. That is the will, I think, of this council, is to keep it within community benefit and also with what the assessment does say. So that'll probably, the assessment won't be done before we budget for next year, but will we have enough information to help us with budgeting for next year?
Likely, yes.
Likely, yes. Okay. I think the only other question that I have, not question, but comment, was one of the things that we talk about here at the city is how much we value our local businesses and how we want to support them. And one of the things that's in our budget that we're looking at approving tonight is a significant amount of sponsorship money to our Chamber of Commerce, who directly works with our local businesses. And so we do value that, and the way we spend our money shows that the value that we place on our local businesses is reflected in that too. So that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Last but certainly not least, Councilmember Kelly Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to commend staff that The budget is beautiful. It's so easy to understand. I have worked with budgets for a long, long time. This is really well done, and thank you. It will be great for our community to be able to read and understand. It's very transparent, so thank you for that. And I love that it's in line with our strategic planning. So thank you for that as well. I appreciate the budget has a really big line item for our general plan, start of that. So thank you for that. And then well done on all of the CIP projects that you guys have completed on time, on budget, even during COVID. So well done. And of course, all of my questions were asked. So I have no questions.
Are
Thank you.
sure?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Very good. So at this juncture, I guess we're gonna go through deliberation to provide our city manager with the proper direction. If there are no other pending items, discussions, amplifications, clarifications. Councilmember Sandy Rings, I should have thought about you.
I know, I'm sorry. I just thought of something. Do we have our fee schedule yet? Updated fee schedule done for the
You mean-
community center, Sea Country, all of the,
Yes, that was approved, gosh, back,
Grand Valley Community Center
Yeah.
was approved. We haven't done anything yet for Sea Country.
right.
it's
But
not
the
for-
new community center, you established all the fees for the
Right, but
rentals
not
and that
for
quite
Sea
a long
Country?
time ago. Not yet. That's
Okay.
coming back to you.
Okay. Do we know like how soon? I mean,
No,
they're
do you
reopening
have a
in
date?
August.
So we could do it in August, September. Absolutely.
Okay. If we could have it done, sometime before they reopen, that would be awesome. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Very good.
No, I would just like to reiterate my appreciation for this transparent budget. I know that's been said over and over, but when I first got on council, and Mayor Minigar also, maybe you'll remember those 4-inch binders with the budget. Very hard to read, very hard to go through. So this is something that any resident can pick up and understand exactly where their taxpayer dollars are going. I also appreciate the recognition that from this dais many times, comments have been made about our reserves, and they were going down when we were building Crown Valley Park, but that was with intention because we had built them up so they could go down so we could provide a spectacular asset and resource to our residents. So now it's time to build up again. So I appreciate that recognition and putting the money in reserves whenever possible. Thank you.
I don't see, okay.
I just wanted to thank you for updating our financial reserves policy. Also, there were some changes on there that needed to be made. And so I just wanted to draw attention that we've updated those. Thank you.
Very good. So the sense that I get is we're gonna ask our city manager to bring back this item to our city council meeting of July 1st. I beg your pardon, June 1st. I'm getting old. It's been June 1st, regular city council meeting. With that, then, thank you very much. It was a great meeting. I don't want to echo what my colleague said. This concludes our budget study session, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:39.